Hello everybody, this is Ahmed and this is another episode in the Breakout podcast here at the School of Advanced Studies, SAS, University of Turin. And today I have with me Giacomo. Giacomo is our professor for 5 years, right?
Now,
Yeah. Giacomo is also, of course, teaching a lot of courses here at SAS. In the core, he's teaching great books, writing and thinking, also electives such as formal logic, and also I had an elective with you, by the way, about the philosophy of time.
Really?
When
Were
it
you
was
in my
open.
class?
Yeah.
When it was open, okay.
When it was open, of course, yeah, I was there.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, Giacomo is interested in, or simply does research in the philosophy of time and sometimes in quantum physics, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. And today we are gonna talk with Giacomo about philosophy, I think.
Yeah, that's what I do mostly. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, and of course I'm really happy to have you in on the podcast today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks.
amazing. So as we discussed, so the first question will be like, yeah, what got you really interested in philosophy?
Yeah, it's strange. I don't have a very brilliant answer, but if I look back, well, I studied philosophy for my BA, then MA, PhD, so I studied mostly philosophy along with other disciplines as well, but mainly philosophy. Well, to be honest, back then I was 18, and when I decided to study philosophy, it was a pretty random choice, to be honest. I mean, not completely random. The thing was that I wanted to leave my city first of all, so I chose a discipline that was not taught in my city, hometown. I decided to go study in Milan, and and the second reason was simply that, well, in Italy we study philosophy in high school. I know it doesn't happen in all countries, and in high school I liked philosophy. My teacher in high school of philosophy was really good, and so I decided my reasoning was, well, I kind of like this discipline, why not studying it? So it wasn't a really, reasoned choice. Yeah, it was kind of random. But I think that, it's often the case that impactful choices have some random elements in it. And I don't see anything wrong with it. Yeah.
You know what? I don't know why I remembered it right now. Is that when I was in the high school in Egypt, the high school are simply 3 years, and in the first year you study simply like too many subjects. Of course, some subjects related to science, but then in the second year you study subjects related to social sciences and humanities, because afterwards in year 3 you will have to determine your kind of profile.
Okay.
Because based on the profile you will also go to the university, and also based on the profile you will have your exams. And yeah, anyway, and in my second year I had courses in philosophy and psychology, and you know what? I never remember taking them. I don't know why. I don't know why. I think it might be because my teachers were not that interested anyway in philosophy.
It could be. I think that the teacher makes a lot of difference. Maybe if I had a really good teacher in biology, I would have ended up studying biology. I don't know. And now I will be in another place and my life will be entirely different. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why I'm saying, there are so many random kind of contingent influences on our lives that we cannot control, but at the same time shape our lives a lot.
Yeah, seriously, because I studied this philosophy and psychology. I don't remember taking them at all, really. And for some reason they didn't, I don't know, maybe, but later in life I got interested so much in philosophy. Later, maybe after I attended my degree in Cairo University, and then I came to Russia, and then I started to ask kind of these questions that philosophy handles. Yeah,
later on too in my life I became genuinely interested in philosophy. But at first, it was this kind of choice.
Yeah, and then you choose also like to study analytical philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. As our audience might know, nowadays philosophy is kind of divided into two schools, so to say, or two traditions, which are commonly called continental philosophy and analytic philosophy. And in many departments, there are some professors that teach analytic philosophy, other professors that teach continental philosophy. And I studied both when I was a student because you had to give exams in both areas, so to say. But I still remember the day when I first attended a class in analytic philosophy. It was a class in logic, actually. And I don't know, it was a big revelation for me. It was love at first sight. Because I really still remember the day 20 years ago. And I don't know, I admired the precision of the concepts that the professor was explaining, and also the level of depth of analysis. I think those were the two things that I liked most when I was first exposed to analytic philosophy. Yeah.
And then you studied then because of logic, you decided then to go through simply analytical philosophy courses?
Well, not only because, at least, in many countries, but at least in Italy, again, as I said, you have to take both kinds of philosophy if you want to graduate in philosophy. So I liked courses in continental philosophy as well, and I took them and passed them. But at some point, in year 3, I just decided that I preferred analytic philosophy, so my BA thesis, my MA thesis was mostly in the area of analytic philosophy,
Mm-hmm. So, and because, I don't know, do you think that you got interested in analytical philosophy because it answered the questions that you had? Or you didn't have any questions, but you just liked the precision of the discipline?
Yeah, I think the second one. I don't like this idea that you come to philosophy because, you stay up at night having these questions that you cannot answer and then finally a philosopher answers them. I don't think it's like that. I think that people approach philosophy, first of all, because it's actually philosophy that helps you raise some questions. It's really interesting that, to me, the most interesting philosophy experiences, be it reading a book or attending a class, is when you think that something is obvious and you're like, and not problematic at all, and then the professor of philosophy comes and makes you realize that what you thought was obvious or unproblematic is actually very problematic. Mm-hmm. So you maybe didn't have a question before philosophizing, and after philosophizing you have a lot of questions and no answer, but I think that's the beauty of it, realizing that what we take for granted, let's say in our everyday lives, many times, it shouldn't be taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was the second approach, to just be exposed to it and realize that things are not as simple as it seems.
And how popular was the field in a way in your university, for example? How popular was analytical philosophy? Did you have to also, did a lot of students, for example, write their thesis on analytical philosophy?
No, we were a huge minority.
Yeah, so,
now things have changed a little bit in Milan, my home department, where I graduated. No, but back when I was a student, I would say even 90% of students would work on continental philosophy, and a small minority of around 10% were doing analytic philosophy.
Because I feel like there is, for example, the same thing is happening. For example, that a lot of students, for example, here, because we don't have departments, we have this interdisciplinary outlook, and also we function in the same way, we operate everything in the same way. And of course, students, when they have this kind of, some questions, they try to philosophize, they of course, they go to continental philosopher, or they take courses on continental philosophy, but for some reason, your courses are extremely popular here, electives, and of course, when the students, even when they go to study with you in the core, they always really like all of that. Do you think that because you are there is a difference between you teaching something, I don't know, for example, teaching, let's say, Hume or Plato, you teach them differently, and that's something, but then the questions that you pose to students in your electives, for example, formal logic, are the questions that can actually challenge your students, and they really like that. So,
I don't know. It's hard for me, actually. It's a very interesting question, but I don't know. We should ask this question to my students. I'm not sure what is the answer. I don't know. Maybe something. Usually, not always, but most of the time, I'm myself passionate about the stuff that I teach. So maybe that can play a role. again, when I teach logic, for instance, which has been rather popular among our students in the last years, I don't know, I just really love doing it, and maybe, I don't know, just this passion helps students, I don't know, be more engaged with the class material, or perhaps they just like the material itself. Yeah, actually, I mean, it's a bit hard for me to answer this. I'm not sure what's the main reason.
I just always think about that whether students actually understand the difference between continental and analytical philosophy. But also, in your opinion, like what kind of questions that both, we can say, branches of philosophy they ask? Like, for example, what are the questions that you will ask, and what are the questions that Siavish would ask?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, this is very debatable, and if you ask another philosopher, they will probably give you another answer. But that's
of course, of course.
But my take is that if you take analytic philosophy and continental philosophy, most of the questions, if not all of them, the questions are the same, or they overlap. They overlap for a good amount. I would say maybe the main difference is not in terms of which questions are posed, which might be the same or are the same in my view, but it's a matter of style of doing philosophy, which I think is rather different in analytic and continental philosophy. So to me, the main difference is this one, style of philosophizing, so to say.
Can you elaborate on that? Like how?
Well, again, what I'm going to say is very partial, and it's mostly my opinion. I would say that, well, I can actually use an example. When I was a student taking both courses, analytic philosophy and continental philosophy, I had a group of students, and we used to study together before the exams, and also we used to discuss a lot the course material together. It was really interesting. And I remember this experience that if we read, let's say, a text in the continental tradition, then there were 4 or 5 different interpretations of this text, and all of them different from each other, and all of them interesting. But let's say 4 or 5 different interpretations of this very same text, and that was what happened with continental philosophy. Whereas when we were studying texts in analytic philosophy, no, there was always one interpretation of the text, one right interpretation, and if we disagreed, and I will say, okay, the interpretation is A, and my fellow students will say it's B. It was because, well, one of the two was wrong, or possibly both. But so in the first case, let's say, I would say there wasn't the correct interpretation of a given text, whereas in the second case, arguably there was. So I don't know. I mean, as a matter of personal taste, I prefer analytic philosophy. I prefer when a text, it is the meaning of the text, what is said is clear. Maybe it's hard to grasp, but once you grasp it, it is one. But I can very well see that some people might counter-argue and say, well, but the fact that in a text of continental philosophy there are different layers of interpretations, it's actually a good thing, because because it can start a debate, for instance. It can, again, provide more than one meaning, so to say, from the very same text, and that could be very well a very positive aspect. It's just that I personally preferred analytic philosophy.
I see. So in this sense, for example, is that the people who are interested in continental philosophy, they choose their poison, if we can say, though, is that there comes with it the intellectual discomfort, because there are too many interpretations, and then they can have a lot of questions, right? And I can understand that. But what is then the poison of analytical philosophy?
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe the poison of analytic philosophy, and maybe it's also a drawback in this sense, is that sometimes analytic philosophers, on the one hand it's an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage, is that they get stuck in a very tiny detail and might discuss it forever, back and forth, about whether, this little detail of a theory, whether it is correct or not. There are many philosophy papers written about, again, a tiny aspect of a theory. On the one hand, it's good because, that's the meaning of analysis, to really scrutinize very well a single point before we proceed. So that's an advantage, but there is also the risk of losing I don't know, a bigger overview of the whole issue that you're studying. By focusing on a little detail, yeah, you might lose this overall picture. So maybe that could be the poison, that you risk of losing the big picture.
Yeah, that's actually interesting, because also, yeah, in continental philosophy, you can always also focus on the big picture,
Yeah.
as well as having a lot of questions about it.
Yeah,
right?
I agree, yeah.
Yeah. So, but both of them come together. For example, a person like me, I haven't ever actually studied analytical philosophy. How then both can help the student, for example? So you took courses on both, on simply in both branches, and you liked that the analytical philosophy more than the continental one, but there is definitely something that impacted you by having both together with you, but despite the fact that later you specialized more in analytical philosophy.
Yeah, for a student I think it's perfect to study both, and in fact at SES we have both courses in analytic philosophy and in continental philosophy. I think it's really good because, as I was saying, the two approaches, the two styles are kind of very different, even though they tackle the same questions. But in a sense, I would say they complement each other. Analytic philosophy, I think it can give you this capacity to analyze, to tackle like a single problem and really analyze it in a very precise way, which is, I think, a very valuable thing. Whereas maybe continental philosophy, as you said, it can give you this discomfort of posing you one question after another, which can be really good, obviously, and also this idea of the bigger picture, which again is. So I would say it's actually good to study both, and I'm glad we do it at SAS.
Yeah, but you know what? I don't know. I feel like, so you do this research, all right, and with direct interaction and of course kind of relationship with quantum physics, all right. Not in its I mean the application, or you are not sitting in a lab or with the physicists or stuff like that, but at least in theory. And how then, for example, your background in analytical philosophy helped you go to that area in this regard?
Well, it actually helps a lot, I think, because if you look at advanced physics, for instance, yes, I have this paper that I recently published with Louis Vervoort. It's on quantum mechanics and on the Bell's theorem. Now, we will not get into the details, but what is fascinating about contemporary physics, so advanced physics, is that, according to many, and I'm one among them, it's actually physics itself, the equations of physics. If you look at the equations of quantum mechanics, for instance, and they actually raise a lot of metaphysical questions about reality. And so physics can do a lot, of course, but at some point it stops. It's hard to give an example without entering details, but it's really fascinating because, I don't know, for instance, our paper was mostly about this idea of action at a distance, because, okay, I'm oversimplifying, but it seems that according to quantum mechanics, it may happen that an event happening here might instantaneously influence another particle, even if it is galaxies away. So it's called action at a distance, simultaneous action at a distance. And these raises, it seems that this is what the equations say, the equations of physics, but this raises all sorts of philosophical issues. I mean, how could we live in a world where there is this kind of spooky action at a distance? How can there be instantaneous causation between two particles, even though they're galaxies away, let's say? And this raises a lot of philosophical questions about the interpretation of physics, so to say. But it's not just interpretation in the sense that the physicists do their job, they tell us how physical reality is, and then comes the philosophers and kind of, philosophizes about it. It's actually these two things, philosophy and physics, are really intertwined. To really understand physics, I would say it's necessary to do some philosophy, and vice versa. So I would say they're really intertwined. There is a lot of research. Usually this field is called theoretical philosophy, but it's really just a combination of physics and metaphysics. Yeah.
We can see in continental philosophy engaged with history, with art, and too many other, or even some to a certain also political science and too many disciplines. But what are and then now we understand that physics, especially the contemporary kind of questions that physics pose, such as quantum entanglement. What are these things?
What else? I get it. Yeah, if you look at the field of analytic philosophy, there are many connections normally with our sciences, like physics, the first one, biology, chemistry, and so on. There is a lot of interdisciplinary work between analytic philosophy and those fields. For sure with neuroscience, so there is a lot of research at the border between neuroscience and analytic philosophy. But other than that, you are right, there isn't much research on, for instance, analytic philosophy and history, or analytic philosophy, as you mentioned, and art. Political philosophy, there is something, again, in analytic philosophy, but not too much. I'm kind of I think that analytic philosophers should engage more with these fields, because I think there is potential for collaborations. But you're right, it's more dominated, these fields that you mentioned in the humanities, art, history, cultural studies, are kind of dominated by continental philosophy.
Maybe because there are not many analytical philosophers who can simply, dedicate their time to other things.
No, in terms of numbers, we have numbers. I think it must be some historical reasons that traditionally analytic philosophers, there is some work, but never work too much with art, for instance. But I think this should change. I think analytic philosophy should try to engage more with humanities.
Because I feel like if there is a potential in asking these kind of physical questions in physics and with these big kind of ideas, even coming back to, right now, I watch a lot of, for example, of podcasts, and I see that really a lot of people try to philosophize with physicists or even, scientists. When they try to explain something, they philosophize. And I see that they actually studied a little bit of analytical philosophy. Then when I go to investigate kind of just to Google their educational background, and I see that they studied analytical philosophy. And I always feel like, why not then an art expert, or simply a person who studied art and art historian and so on and so forth, also doesn't have a connection with analytical philosophy?
Yeah, it's a pity. I don't know. I think, maybe we should start this.
I would like to see actually a student thesis.
Maybe, that would be great.
That would be really interesting.
Be great, because I think there is potential.
What kind of instruments we can give to the student to help them go and ask a question that it's art related, related to art or art history, and also related to analytical philosophy, in order to write the thesis?
Yeah, okay, tough. I don't know, because I think analytic philosophy, again, as I was saying before, provides you with a methodology. And then maybe, hopefully, this methodology is kind of universal. So, this idea that I was telling you before, that analytic philosophy gives you this methodology of tackling a problem with formal methods, with precision, and that. I would say that's a rather universal thing. So I would say that analytic philosophy could contribute with conceptual analysis, with methodology, and then maybe it can be applied to, let's say, our art history in our example. Maybe, I don't know, we should try.
I think we should try, but I'm just thinking about what type of courses the student should simply take or attend or whatever, in order for them to have a kind of a confidence in actually kind of bringing these two fields together. Because right now if we live in this interdisciplinary kind of world, and we cannot ask a question and answer it simply through different discipline. And I really think that maybe there is a potential in just using analytical philosophy, but I can't put my finger on courses that students can go through to have the confidence in asking these questions?
Well, just to promote my elective, I would say logic. No,
Okay.
because jokes aside, I think it can help with conceptual analysis and with regimenting maybe your thoughts. And then this regimentation can be applied, I think, to any discipline. And maybe as well some courses in metaphysics again, because metaphysics is a branch of philosophy which is quite general in scope.
Yeah.
And again, well, in very general terms, you ask questions like, what is the nature of reality around us? And you can maybe, again, to stick of our example, to our example of art history, you can do metaphysics of art, what it means for something to be a work of art, what are the metaphysical features of this specific work of art, for instance, that you're studying if you're a student in your thesis. So maybe, yeah, those two could be useful, I would say.
Yeah, that is actually very interesting because I think that there is definitely a potential there, and it would be just lovely to see a student thesis connecting both or coming.
Yeah, I would be excited to see such a work.
Really nice. Yeah. Okay. So and the use. So we see, like, for example, this is, if we can call it, like, the limitations of analytical philosophy.
The poison.
The poison, right? The poison of analytical philosophy. But what are the things? I don't know if we touch it. Maybe it wasn't clear to me. But like the most kinda urgent question that analytical philosophers right now are wrestling with. All right.
Well, yeah, again, those, I would say, well, the first two that come to my mind for sure is the so-called problem of consciousness, which seems to be an intractable problem. I don't work on it. I mean, it's not my area of research, but I would say it's one of the most important ones. I mean, it has always been around. I mean, how it's possible that from some basic matter in the brain and interaction between, you know, physical things like neurons in my brain's consciousness emerge. This is a classical problem, but with the advent of neuroscience and the quick development of neuroscience, this problem is somehow more relevant now. Or at least, thanks to science, we have a new perspective on it, so there is more philosophy to do about it. So there are these classical questions such as, can a machine be conscious or not? What does it mean to be conscious? How can we be conscious? So that's one. Well, and the second one could be probably artificial intelligence. A lot of philosophers, both in the analytic and the continental tradition, rightly so right now, are working about the challenges of artificial intelligence. For obvious reasons. What is it? Does it have ethical implications? What kind of ethical implications? Yeah.
And they both come together. I mean, the continental and the analytical philosophers, they come together to ask questions related. I mean,
to artificial. Yeah, I think again, as before, of course, they both can contribute to these questions. I mean, again, maybe from different perspectives, but both perspectives are going to be useful, I guess.
Yeah, I think we mentioned everything,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Amazing. So this is it. Questions, comments, anything? Of course, to Giacomo, if you have any questions, actually you can.
I will check the YouTube channel.
Giacomo will check the YouTube channel. But really, thank you so much, Giacomo, for coming in today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah,
it was really interesting.
That was really interesting. I actually liked it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And any questions? Please, just anytime. See ya.